in a sense, the question must be is why is Spencer Cox's voice so unique? Here we are in this moment in the country, and we have become so used to so much division that we almost expect more of that division from our political leaders on either side. And so to have, listening to Spencer Cox yesterday on the Sunday shows, what struck me is how he was prepared to be bold. He didn't mince his words when it came to social media, describing it as a cancer, describing the algorithms that drive us to division as evil. He was dealing in a world of facts and evidence, rather than in a world where he was trying to take an event and use it for political gain. And the sad thing is that his voice is so surprising to us in this moment. Do you see anyone else in that realm?
Well, I'm sure there is. I think, the issue is the incentive structure. Utah has a different sort of incentive structure politically. It rewards this sort of political behavior. But as we've seen over the past decade in particular, politicians are often very wary of their own base. And then the incentive structures to raise money and to become popular and well-known within your party does not acting the way Spencer Cox has been acting, being conciliatory, trying to be understanding, trying to point out the flaws on your side as well as the other side. It just doesn't play well. The roots of this really go back. One of the things I always found very interesting back in the pre-Trump era, even in the Reagan era, when we thought politics was normal, was that there was one thing the parties always agreed on when I would interview political operatives, campaign operatives, even activists. Here's what they agreed on. The other side plays dirty. I wish we did too. I wish we played as dirty as them because then we would win more often. And then what we found, and it's so ironic because this century we've seen power in Washington swing back and forth between Democrats and Republicans in the House, in the Senate, is that one of the parties wins an election and they immediately declare this may be the last election we ever win. Everything is stacked against us. The system is rigged against us. We have to do everything we absolutely can now because we're never going to have power again. And of course, the public then says you went too far. They give power to the other party and they repeat the cycle. And my point is I don't know how we get back to a place where both parties are willing to self-police and self-examine. And just for the sake of trying to lower the temperature like we do in our own personal relationships when we're not quite sure that, well, I don't know. I think maybe my wife's at fault, but I'm just going to say it was my fault because I love her and I don't want to fight anymore. We need more of that in politics, given where we are after last week, and there just aren't a lot of voices that find it advantageous to do that.
Well, and a big part of the problem there, and Jonathan Lemire, we've seen it. We've seen it since the tragedy of Charlie Kirk. A lot of it is that there are people on cable news networks, there are people running podcasts that are talking about civil war. Of course, they talked about civil war before, but they're talking about civil war and needing to go after the left, and they're coming after us. We need to, Elon Musk retweeting tweets in the hours after the tragic death of Charlie Kirk. But again, some of the same people that barely said a word, certainly didn't call for civil war after a Democratic legislator this past summer, the leader of the Democrats, got slaughtered in her home along with her husband by a man with a Democratic hit list of 42 Democrats, a kill list. We heard nothing about that. We heard nothing from these people who are now talking about the need for civil war and to go after the left, the wackos on the far left. We heard nothing about that after Josh Shapiro and his family were sleeping inside their home when somebody tried to burn it down and said they wanted to take a hammer to Governor Shapiro's head. We heard nothing about a civil war then. We certainly didn't after Paul Pelosi. In fact, you will remember, as I remember very well, not only were they not talking about civil war, there were actually some people mocking and ridiculing Paul Pelosi, some prominent
conspiracy theories.
Prominent Republican figures mocking and ridiculing Paul Pelosi and Nancy Pelosi, and even suggesting that the man who attacked him was in a gay relationship with him for years. So to hear these people talking about civil war now, just again is baffling when they seem so disinterested when the killings, when the attempted killings, when the assaults were on the other side. I think again, every sane American, every American I've actually spoken to in person since the terrible, terrible tragedy, the assassination of Charlie Kirk, have been horrified and ask the same question: when is this going to end? How can we come together? How had one law enforcement officer say, how do we keep social media away from our children? How much longer does this continue? But we're just not hearing it from people that are trying to fan the flames and talking about civil war. I wish we could come together as Americans after a tragedy. After this summer, Democrats are slaughtered while sleeping in their bedrooms, and when Republicans are assassinated, going out talking to college students, for God's sake.
Yeah. The prospect of an actual civil war is too horrifying to comprehend, and that rhetoric needs to go away. But that's not what's happening here. We are seeing figures on the right, within moments of Charlie Kirk's terrible death, rushing to blame left-wing activists for it, without any evidence, without even at that moment knowing who the suspect was. You are so right to point to the double standard here. Some of the loudest voices of the Republican Party, including the current president of the United States, turned the attack on Paul Pelosi into a running gag. Trump will use it as a running punchline at his rallies. Paul Pelosi nearly died. The White House did not send a delegation to Minnesota this summer when that state lawmaker was killed. That didn't happen. And there's been an effort here to sort of cast about from the right, sort of pointing fingers at the left to sort of claim that Democratic politicians are reveling in Charlie Kirk's death. That's simply not been the case. People have been responsible. They've been mournful. This is an American tragedy. It's not just a Republican tragedy. It's not a Democratic tragedy. It's an American tragedy. But there is this sort of sense of this could be a pretense for some sort of crackdown, and that would be just make things worse. It would fan the flames. There's so little we know yet about this shooter and his motives. And again, they almost shouldn't matter, because what happened here, it's a culture, a society where we've had this rise in political violence. We are awash in guns. It's clear. One thing we do know about this individual, a lot of time online, that the worries of the dangers of social media become more and more clear each and every day. That's what we should be focusing on. And I'll just note the governor there from Utah said again, he said a few different times in the last couple of days, I think this is important. He made it clear the killing of Charlie Kirk was the acts of one individual. It wasn't a conspiracy. It wasn't a movement. It wasn't about a political party. It was about one individual. And he seemed to be aiming that message straight at the Oval Office, trying to say, look, this is a time for trying to bring a nation together. This nation is wounded, Joe and Mika. It is grieving. It is scared. It's time for healing. It's time, finally, for a message of unity, not division.
The nation does need to come together, and we need to stop, and we need to think, what kind of nation have we become when you can't have a political figure, a podcaster going on a college campus to debate politics, to aggressively debate politics. What kind of nation have we become when a president can't campaign without having 2 assassination attempts on him? What kind of nation have we become when a Democratic leader can't go to bed with her husband at night without fears of being killed in their home, or a state senator in that same state can't go to sleep with his wife without fears of being gunned down and killed? And this goes back. I mean, we could talk about all the anti-Semitic attacks, the anti-Semitic attack at the Israeli embassy earlier this year, the firebombing out in Colorado. We could talk about the Tree of Life. We could go all the way back to 2017 and the congressional softball game, the practice there, and the scars that Steve Scalise still carry with him every day. We've got to do better. Our leaders have to do better. People on media have to do better. People with podcasts have to do better. Everybody has to do better. Debate, and debate aggressively. But never let it turn, never let it cross the line into violence. And when it does, we have to stand shoulder to shoulder as a nation and condemn it in its strongest terms, whether it happens in Utah, whether it happens in Minnesota, or whether it happens in Butler, Pennsylvania. We have to do it, or this nation will continue to get worse. And those calling for civil war, well, they may just get their wish. Years down the road, it'll take a while. But if that's what they keep preaching and that's what they keep practicing, God help us all.